Welcome back to the Speak Your Piece podcast. My name is Ian McNaughton, Big E. Thank you very much for joining me. Appreciate it. We got a good show for you. Lots to discuss, lots to talk about, mostly because I didn't get the podcast out earlier this week. Sorry about that. So we'll at least get one in this week. That's a positive, right? You people are craving for content. So here you go. Here comes the content, as Bo Burnham says. I don't know. Here's some content. Here's a podcast. I'm doing this on Friday morning, not Thursday night after the game. Doing it Friday morning. Basically, last night was a busy day. Was watching the football games. Cowboys and Giants both stink. I don't care what the Cowboys do until the playoffs. They could win out the rest of the season. It does not matter for the Dallas Cowboys. They need to at least get to an NFC Championship game, if not a Super Bowl. I do not care what they do the rest of the season. That was a boring, dull game. The Giants at least have a couple dudes. Malik Neighbors, he's a dude. Kayvon Thibodeau, he's a dude. Andrew Thomas, that's a dude. They have dudes. They're not a good team. They don't have a good quarterback. I think their coaching is fine. They are mid. They are yeah. They're not very good. It was a very boring game, very dull game. A lot of injuries last night too, which is to be expected when it's a short week and you're playing on the MetLife field. So not a great watching experience last night. I really enjoyed watching Army play Temple. I listen. If you haven't figured out by now, I'm a sicko and a degenerate, so this is completely on brand for myself. But Army, watching them run their triple option last night against Temple, and Temple's not a very good team. I can't remember who's Temple. Temple has one win, I think, over this year, and probably not against a good team. But they are terrible. Army's undefeated. I think Army is like 4-0, 5-0 now. Army's looking really good. Like Army could be a playoff team, which I think they have to because now for some reason they're in the like American Athletic Conference. I feel like that's bullshit when it comes to all this realignment stuff. There's a lot of bullshit stuff in college football with the realignment. I don't have time to get into all of it, but Army, I don't know if Navy's in a conference too. Navy's probably in the AAC too, but Army, Navy, Notre Dame, UConn, there's got to be at least like five independent teams. If there's not five independent teams, what are we doing here? You don't need to be in a conference to be successful. You know what I mean? You don't need a significant other in your life to be successful. This is coming from the perpetually single individual who doesn't need somebody else to make me successful. I am successful on my own, as my own brand, as my own person. I'm telling you, Army, Navy, you guys don't need a conference. You guys are big enough and talented enough on your own. You're the Army football program. You are the United States Naval Academy football team. You don't need a conference. You don't need a significant other. You are perfect the way you are. From a football standpoint, obviously there's some, you know, probably some problematic issues inside the United States military, in the Army and Naval academies, but that's not the point. That's not the point. So I loved watching Army. That was the highlight of watching football last night. Was just watching Army. Their run fits were incredible. They blocked tremendously. They had two, three guys going through the whole, lead blocking. If you have 5, 10 minutes, if you have free time, if you're looking to kill time in the next however long, watch Army just run the fucking ball down Temple's throat on Thursday night. I think they ran for over 400 yards. Like those guys are incredible. Those dudes were tremendous. Shout out Army. I don't know that I could be. I don't know if there's a moral issue with bandwagoning for the United States Army. I have built dynasties with them in not this college football, but the last college football was at NCAA football 14. I built an Army dynasty, but I didn't do it in triple option. I did it in like a multiple offense where, um, like it was basically I would run like a Maryland formation, which instead of like this is really getting And we are really plunging new depths here. But a Maryland formation is like two fullbacks instead of the I formation, which has like it goes quarterback, fullback, halfback. The Maryland formation is quarterback, fullback, tailback, halfback. I don't know what the actual proper position designation is, but basically you have two fullbacks. You have two lead blockers instead of just one. So basically, my Army dynasty would go from that, which is pretty kick-ass. It's kind of a goal line cheat, shall we say? If you need like fucking a yard on fourth down or a goal line touchdown, Maryland formation, to then going like five wide or quads, like single receiver left side, quad receiver set on the right side. So I do like Army because I have built dynasties with them before. I don't know if I can technically bandwagon for the United States Army. There's something a little wrong with that. But they looked really good on Thursday night against Temple. I'll say that much. They looked tremendous running the triple option. Way more exciting than watching Cowboys Giants. Not even close. So those are the Thursday football games. The big headline, obviously, on Thursday was the final game for the Oakland A's at the Oakland Coliseum. In case you don't know, the Oakland A's are eventually moving to Las Vegas. They're supposed to play 3 years in Sacramento at the AAA Stadium in Sacramento. And then once those 3 years are done, they're supposed to go to the new stadium in Vegas. It's similar to the Arizona Coyotes in that um, basically they are supposed like unlike the Coyotes, the A's actually are supposed to have a new stadium in Vegas. There is supposed to be a building there by the end of it. However, they have to go play at the temporary small arena for like 3 seasons. So kind of like how the Coyotes played in Tempe at the temporary small arena for whatever amount of time. Um, there is supposed to be a light at the end of the tunnel per se for an A stadium. Now, obviously, we don't need to get into how stupid this all is. The A should be in Oakland. There should be a new stadium in Oakland. Um, the A's really got screwed by the ownership, by John Fisher, who did not and has not invested in the team, has put back anything into the team, which is frankly disturbing and frustrating. You don't need me to tell you that. And part of the reason why the A's don't have a new stadium is because the city of Oakland wasn't going to subsidize the building, and they basically said no to the Golden State Warriors, who then moved to San Francisco. They said no to the Oakland Raiders, who moved to Las Vegas, and now the A's are the next team out of Oakland, and they're on their way to Vegas. And that's heartbreaking, really, because no fan, no city should ever have to lose three sports teams for because they're like they didn't do anything to not deserve a sports team. Like the Oakland fan bases have done nothing wrong in this situation. It's not that they didn't show up to support their teams. It's not that they were casual fans. They get caught up in the middle of bureaucracy, and as a result, everybody leaves because the owners have control. The owners can do what they want, and they're going to go find a new venue elsewhere. I don't really making this taking this to a personal direction for a bit. I don't have a true Oakland A's connection. I've seen them play obviously the Mariners a bunch of times in Seattle. I grew up. I remember watching like the Jason Kendalls, the Andy Chavez's, the Mark Ellis's, the Barry Zeno's of the world, the Mark Kotze's, who's now the manager for the Oakland A's. I remember watching all those guys growing up. Um, my real appreciation for the Oakland A's came when watching Moneyball. Like as a kid, I thought that was the coolest thing. The fact that you could find different ways of succeeding in spite of cheap ownership, which is really what that is. And sports sports are different now than they were say 20 years ago when Moneyball was set. You know how we view owners, how we view sports teams. They're not teams, they're franchises. You know, the valuations are crazy. And you know, the Oakland A's, I don't think even maybe scratched 80 million on a payroll this year, which is insanity that in the year of 2024 we have to scratch and claw to get 80 million on a payroll. Now you might be thinking, oh well, that's just the A's. They're going to Vegas. We already knew they were leaving town, so they're just shedding payroll left, right, and center. Yeah, but that's like there's also the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pittsburgh Pirates released Rowdy Tellez within the last week because he was 6 at bats from a $200,000 bonus for getting X amount of at bats per year. The Miami Marlins have, I think, a 90 million payroll. If that, like, there's too many teams in 2024 who don't have a $100 million payroll, and that's unacceptable. You can't keep crying foul or poor because you want to. None of these teams are poor. It's cheap owners. Every more or less sports team is worth at least 800, 900 million US. Pretty close to it. The Coyotes were probably one of the last. The Ottawa Senators got sold for $1 billion not that long ago. Like, all of these teams are complaining to be poor and, oh, we can't afford this, we can't afford that. And there's a difference between being poor and, yeah, you have to make money at it. I get that aspect of it. But if you're just in the market to make money, if you're just in this as an investment, not as an actual, hey, let's go win a championship, let's go win a title, then fuck off. I don't have time for people who don't want to take it seriously. And there are people who do want to take it seriously. It's not every owner is cheap and crying poor and all this sort of stuff. Like the LA Dodgers take it seriously. They're really about more or less the only ones. You know, the Mets tried, I don't know, however long ago. It didn't work out, which is, that's fine. Cohen's got however many billions of dollars. He can throw, you know, a billion at Verlander and Scherzer, and if it fails, it fails. But at least he's trying. At least there's an effort being made. Unlike the Seattle Mariners, unlike um, the White Sox, unlike the Angels, these are all teams that don't really care, are using it as an investment. They probably do care to an extent, but they care more about making a profit than they do winning a World Series. And unfortunately, I think that speaks. I think there's more owners, I think, who look at it like that. With how sports ownership is today, that's the main goal. And as unfortunate as that is, it's just how it is. You also have a commissioner in Rob Manfred who not only it seems like he not only likes this, but he embraces it. He doesn't embrace it publicly because it would make him look bad, but everything that Major League Baseball has done has been to obviously to protect the owners because that's Manfred's job. He works for the owners. But there's no incentive to not do what the A's are doing. There's no incentive to not do what the Marlins are doing. There's no incentive to not do what the Pirates are doing. Um, like it's actually like they're probably, when they go to the owners meetings this year, they're probably gonna be all be fist pumping and like, oh, you generated this one, this was your profit margin this year. Wow, well, hey, well done, good for you, man. Congratulations. Like, and that's what's frustrating, is that now, because some asshole in Oakland didn't care, didn't put any effort in to actually making a new stadium or building a new stadium or getting a new stadium in Oakland, there's not going to be a new stadium in Oakland. There's not going to be a team in Oakland. He could have, let Oakland have the A's. He could have let some other local businessman have the team for the sake of having the team. But it's not about the team. It's not about the brand. It's not about the logo. It's about the profit. And John Fisher is obviously smart enough to realize that he can make a better profit margin with a baseball team than probably, I don't know, 50% other things, 60% other things that he could be investing in. Instead, he would rather take this thing that he knows can get him X amount of dollars each year at a X amount rate, and he'll move it. He'll change it. He'll find, he'll tell you that he can find 30,000 fans somewhere else. That he can get to 2 million people yearly in attendance. And you know what? Maybe he can. Maybe he can. But to have that attitude and to be that selfish and to not think about the millions of other people, the millions who have showed up to Oakland Coliseum over the years, supported the A's, been there for the A's, all the season ticket holders, to not only shun them of their, hometown, their pride and joy, their baseball team. He's shunning them out and basically saying, "No, you guys are the reason you were moving. You guys are bad people. You guys are the reasons why this can't work." And we've seen the A's work. The A's have worked in Oakland for like 50 years. Like, this is arguably the long. I can't remember if it's Philadelphia or Oakland. Like, this is the longest this team has been in this city, more or less. Like, this team has been in one city. This is what I'm trying to say, and it's worked. It would work if you got a new ballpark that was modern and wasn't leaking, and the sight lines weren't you weren't sitting in San Jose to watch it because the foul lines are so far, or the foul territory is so deep. So I guess the takeaway is, fuck the owners and the billionaires who are trying to make this about profit, are trying to make this about generating revenue, instead of trying to go out and win a title. And I say this as a Mariners fan who is not happy with my team's current ownership, because, Forbes has said that the Mariners are the most profitable team in the last 2 years. I can't remember what the stat is, but the Mariners are one of the most profitable teams. And yeah, that's because the ownership doesn't spend the money on the field to put out a contending ball club. And I get that you can do. I'm sorry to make this about the Mariners for a second, but I know you can do the hot dogs in heaven promotion, and people are going to come for that. More people are going to come, and there's going to be more talk about you having a fucking really good ball club that can win 100 games then there is some stupid promotion that you do in the seventh inning for every game. And the A's obviously tried their very best, their very hardest to make a winning team out of limited resources, out of a broken pencil and paper that was ripped. Like I don't know I don't know how to describe it, but they did they were the best for many years at getting the most out of everybody. And that in a way should be commended. That should be respected because that's not easy to do. There is some talent and some skill involved in that. But at the same time, you now in 2024 can spend money. You have money. All of these owners have money. Nobody is poor. Nobody has a lack of resources. Nobody. Yeah, I understand there are smaller markets. No owner is a small owner. There is no such thing as a small owner because sports ownership, sports franchises are more or less owned by billionaires. And these guys can be cheap. These guys can, they don't want to spend money because that's not how they got billions was by spending money. Which what's this the Simpsons bit where you know Bill Gates shows up to the Simpsons house and he's like, there's a copyright infringement or something, and Bill Gates is like, I didn't get rich by writing checks. That's basically how these owners operate and think. And in that instance, in The Simpsons, that's just a cruddy storyline with a little bit of comedic effect. These are fucking sports teams. These are people that are paying, I'd say, pretty good money to come and watch your product and support your product. And while you can say that you're giving back by, you know, hey, we have all these beers, or hey, we're doing this T-shirt ticket giveaway combo. You have this ticket special, whatever. Just hold the owners of your team, hold them to a high standard, hold them to high expectations because they have. If anybody has the means to make a team successful, it's the owners. It is they have the money to spend, and it's another thing to spend money poorly. I get that, but even just if you just just ask for your owners to spend 100 million at least in a payroll. That's the bare minimum. And if you're somebody like the Seattle Mariners, who are one of the more profitable teams, okay, well then you should be able to spend more on a team, on a roster. No, that's too bad. And if you're the Oakland A's, if you're a fan of the A's, I'm really sorry because nobody should ever have to lose their team. Nobody should ever have to lose three of their local teams in a span in a ever. And you don't have I hope Oakland people of Oakland do not support the A's. I wouldn't expect them to if once they move. But I think the lesson is to always to fight for what you believe in, to stand up for what you think is right, and fuck the owners who just don't care about profits over people, and that's just how it is. That's just what we're heading toward, if it wasn't already clear, that's where the asteroid's heading. That's where it's going. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it works. It's might mean we have more teams relocating, more teams moving. Who knows? But RIP to the Oakland A's. One of the toughest outs like they always kept fighting. That was the thing about the Oakland A's, that that was a team that was just tough to go up against sometimes. Like they just, yeah. I can't say enough good things about the Oakland A's for all the years that they've been around. So stick around. We'll be right back, and yeah, we'll talk some football here in a little bit. All right, welcome back. I wanted to discuss some of the things that I wanted to discuss on the early week pod. So I'm basically everything I was going to say earlier this week, I'm now just bringing to the forefront on Friday. I wasn't going to discuss the A's and the Thursday games, but yeah, I wanted to talk about the A's because the A's were on my mind and I thought it was important to discuss. Um, the big takeaway last week in the NFL that I'm bringing up this week because I still think it's relevant. The Jacksonville Jaguars are wasting some of Trevor Lawrence's prime, unfortunately. Um, in case you didn't know, the Jags, I don't know what the final score was. I think they gave up 40 points to the Bills last Monday, which not really kind of surprising, not really surprising. The other surprising thing on Monday night was Jaden Daniels and the Commanders' offense. Those guys are legit. That's a solid team. I don't know that they'll have a performance as good as that because that was really good and the Bengals pass rush was terrible. But that Commanders offense looked solid on Monday, really good. But the Jags were bad, and the Jags have been bad. They're 0-3 this year, and I remember so on Monday after the game, I was thinking back to 2019 when I was in Japan. I was freelancing Rugby World Cup, and woke up one morning. I can't remember what day it was, but it was probably on a Monday, and got a notification on my phone. It was like Washington has fired Jay Gruden in 2019. I think at the time they were 0-4, 0-5, and I was a little surprised at first. I was like, oh, okay. But then obviously, like, yeah, this checks out. They're 0-5. They haven't been that good since he's been head coach. And among reasons why Jay Gruden was fired by Washington in 2019, one of them was they felt like he was not suitable to develop Dwayne Haskins, who was their first round quarterback pick in the 2019 draft. I think he was taken 15th overall. Obviously, Dwayne Haskins isn't here anymore. Rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins. But they fired Jay Gruden because Washington, among other things, didn't think that Gruden was right to develop him. Now, if I remember correctly, Gruden didn't want Haskins, didn't want to take Haskins with that first round pick. If I remember, I think it was like the GM and ownership does, and the coaching staff didn't. So like they were butting heads, anyways. But basically, once they went to 0-5, that gave them the free reign to fire him. And part of this feels very similar in Jacksonville right now. The Jags are 0-3. They are 3-9 in the last 12 games going back to last season. And in the last calendar year, Trevor Lawrence has just two 300-yard passing games. October 8th against Buffalo and November 26th against Houston. In the last calendar year, those are the only two games that Lawrence has thrown for at least 300 yards. Now, in that time, the Jags have played Atlanta at home. They were at Buffalo. It was one of the 300-yard passing games for Lawrence. They hosted Indy. They were at New Orleans on a Thursday night. They were at Pittsburgh. They hosted San Francisco. They hosted Tennessee. They were at Houston, the other 300-yard passing game. hosted Cincinnati, at Cleveland, hosted Baltimore, at Tampa Bay, at Tennessee, and then this year they've been at Miami, they hosted Cleveland, they're at Buffalo. Now, say what you will about the schedule, it's not the easiest, but you would think there's more than 300-yard passing games in there if you are Trevor Lawrence. And I think what it comes down to from watching Jags highlights and trying to get a bit of an understanding. Obviously, there's a couple plays the other night that were not good for Lawrence. That interception against Hamlin was not great. Bit of an overthrow. But I think with the Jags is that you have the quarterback. I think you have the guy. I think you have a guy that you can build around. And it's just trying to find the right coach to unlock that skill set and make it work and make it mesh. And I don't know that Peterson is the guy. I kind of thought at first he was. Now it's entering year 3 and it hasn't gotten better. So the other situation I will say this reminds me of is the 2020 Philadelphia Eagles. And I don't know if you guys remember the Sunday Night Football game at the end of the year in 2020 between Washington and Philly. Um, and it just kind of felt like everything had ran its course with the Eagles at that time. It ran its course with Doug. They ran their course with Doug Peterson as their head coach, with Carson Wentz as their quarterback, with just that whole core, that group. It just kind of felt like it ran out of steam. Like it was done. We all could use a different, different location, different space, different everything. We just need to call it good. And that's kind of the vibe I'm getting with Peterson and the Jags now. Sometimes, like they did in Philadelphia, things just run its course. And that's what's happening right now with Peterson coaching Lawrence in Jacksonville. Like, I think the Jags are fine. I think they're an okay team. But this has a real opportunity to go off the rails, to really go poorly if Peterson is still coaching this team, or if Lawrence continues to make the same mistakes that he's been making the last few weeks. So I don't think they have. I checked on Monday when I tried to record, but they don't have anybody who's a great replacement, a great interim. So they probably are just going to ride Peterson out for the rest of the year. But it's not good. Like it's not good right now with the Jags, with Trevor Lawrence, with Doug Peterson. And I will say, I think it's easier to find the coach than it is to find the quarterback. You have found the quarterback. You have found a guy. You have paid him this much money. You are guaranteeing this much money. I think you have to make it work with this guy for, at least another year. Give him another year with another coaching staff, because if you know this coach, if you know this guy isn't the answer, then you have to get rid of him. You can't waste any more of Lawrence's prime. If you know he's not the guy, you have to get rid of him. There is such a finite amount of time that you have with a young quarterback in his prime. He's not on a rookie deal anymore. I understand that. But there is a finite amount of time that you have with a young quarterback who you think is a franchise-worthy quarterback. And if you're going to waste that because you think the coach is good enough, that's a problem. That's an issue. So, and then following that up, which 0-3 team? So, because somebody was asking me the other day, which 0-3 team is in the worst position? So you have the Bengals who are 0-3, you have the Jags who are 0-3, and you have the Tennessee Titans who are 0-3. And I talked a little bit about the Bengals with their game on Monday. They looked terrible. They were not prepared. They looked ill-coached. They looked just outmatched against the Commanders, which is really concerning. I don't like that. But the Bengals have the best players and the best coaches among these 3 teams to get them out of this situation, to get back into the playoffs. Even if they look like dog shit on Monday, I still think they have the best players and coaches of these three teams to put themselves in a good position. I talked about the Jags, and I still think they have some dudes and a decent enough schedule. Theoretically, they could make a run. But this is also the Jacksonville Jaguars. They don't have a history of doing this. I don't trust them as much as somebody like Cincinnati to bounce back and get out of it. Maybe they do. I doubt it. I just don't see it with the Jags. I don't want to say they're too far gone because I think there's still time. We're still in September. They just need to get that ball rolling. Whether it's a new coach, whether it's a new play caller, whether it's a new whatever, they need to figure it out and quick as fast as they can. The Titans are the mean team of 2024. I don't know how they get out of this hole. They don't have the talent. They don't have the coaching. They are probably going to be drafted in the top 5 this year and taking a quarterback because Will Levis has just been nothing but funny memes this season. I I don't think that Tennessee was unlike those other teams, like unlike Cincinnati and Jacksonville. I don't know that Tennessee was expecting or as motivated to make a playoff run this year. I think they're in a rebuild, which is fine. That's okay. They they're cool just sitting at the bottom, and hopefully they're developing some guys. So in a couple of years, he'll be really good. They're just not there now. They lost to the Bears, which is not a good look as of right now. They lost to the Jets by a touchdown, which looks okay, and then I think they gave up. They lost by double digits to the Packers, which is not great. So Cincinnati is too good to be 0-3. I think they'll figure it out. Jacksonville is probably better than the record shows, but I think this is gonna get worse before it gets better. I think with Jacksonville. And Tennessee isn't that good and are probably a write-off. I don't trust the Titans to, especially in their division. I don't think they're getting back anytime soon. So, all right, we'll take another break. Coming up after, we're going to be discussing Daniel Ricciardo, who is leaving Racing Bulls. All right, welcome back. When I was recording, or when I tried to record earlier this week, I was going to talk about how Daniel Ricciardo is potentially out of his way out of racing. Is potentially out on his way out of Racing Bulls. Okay, there I said it. Currently, Ricciardo 14th in the driver's standings, 12 points, 10 points behind his teammate Yuki Tsunoda. I think a lot of what I was gonna put or say on Monday, Tuesday still resonates now. Because one of the big questions is why now? Why did they getting rid of Ricciardo now and not at the end of the year? And frankly, for Racing Bulls, Ricciardo has failed to live up to the expectations. I should clarify and give some context here. So, Racing Bulls is not Red Bull. So obviously there's okay. So in Formula One, there's Red Bull. Red Bull is like I think they're the number one. I don't know if they're. I think they're number 2 right now in the constructor points, but they're one of the best Formula One teams. Red Bull is one of, if not the best. They have a sister team. It's supposed to be theoretically a development team, um, formerly known as AlphaTauri. Now they're known as Racing Bulls, and Ricardo has been racing for Racing Bulls for the last, I guess, year because he replaced Nick DeVries in the middle of last year. Now he's been racing for them this year, and it worked out about the same. So about a year. And Red Bull has a reserve driver. His name is Liam Lawson. He's been a reserve driver for Red Bull. He's been a reserve driver for Racing Bulls. He's part of the Red Bull team, if that makes sense. So basically, like, trying to explain how this would make sense in a North American sports way. So basically, like, let's say you have the Toronto Maple Leafs and then the Toronto Marlies. Like, the Maple Leafs are like Red Bull, the Marlies are like Racing Bulls, and there's this prospect in junior Liam Lawson who is going to come up and he's taking over Daniel Ricciardo's spot. Um, this kind of gives Lawson a head start on understanding the Racing Bulls car before next season. Lawson is supposed to be. I don't know if he's officially getting the second seat at Racing Bulls next year. Basically, it's presumed to be him and Yuki Tsunoda at Racing Bulls next season. Now, the main reason why this is a significant story is because this past Sunday at the Singapore Grand Prix, nobody would say that it was Daniel's last race. Not just Formula One, but at least just with Racing Bull. Um, you know, it was challenging to kind of watch and see all on play on a social because everybody was very vague, everybody was very ambiguous, nobody was saying yes, this is happening. They're like, this might happen. It might. We don't know for sure. It looks like it's gonna happen, but we don't know. And it just felt like that F1 and Racing Bulls didn't give Ricardo the proper send off. Like if they knew they were going to do this, if they, you know, if they knew for sure that they were going to do this, then why didn't they just take the time to give the thanks and the recognition to Ricardo when they had the opportunity and they had the limelight on them on Sunday? Instead, they were basically like, we're looking into it. Racing Bulls is like, we're gonna look internally and see what we're gonna do, and that was like Sunday or Monday or whatever. And it's like, no, I think you guys knew. You didn't make a decision in 3 days. You had an idea what you were gonna do beforehand, and all of this just feels disrespectful to Daniel Ricciardo. He's been someone who's raced in F1 for a long time. He has never been a world drivers champion, but he's won multiple races. Um, he's been a fan favorite. Like Daniel Ricciardo has done so much for Formula One in terms of growing Formula One, getting people interested, making people care. He is one of the biggest personalities in Formula One, and to not shun him, but to just kind of like, write some, vague social media, like whatever. Like they could have done this and announced this so much better than what they did this past weekend. And to do this to someone who has generated so much interest in Formula One and probably generated Formula One quite a bit of money, it's very disappointing and it's very upsetting. And as a fan favorite, he deserves better from Racing Bulls, from F1. You saw the drivers on social media this week, like, hey, thank you, Danny. So many drivers complimented him and were there for him. It's nice to see that the drivers were complimenting him and were there for him. It's very frustrating to see the people that run the sport and operate it did not share that same gratitude and did not share that same things, or did not do it when they should have and when they had the platform to on Sunday in Singapore. Now, at the same time, I don't know that Ricardo needs to race in Formula One. I think there's an open Haas seat or Sauber or whatever. There's an open seat still left. But I don't know that he needs to be racing in Formula One. I think, the risks associated with racing in F1 are extremely high. And while I'm sure he's still passionate about it, I don't think he needs to prove to anyone how phenomenal of a racer he is. We've seen it. He got podiums with a Renault. Like, that's how good he is. He got podiums with a Renault during the pandemic. So I think he's a big enough personality that he can get into media, podcasting, anything entertainment, and people would watch. People would be interested. He is a brand himself that people are interested in, that care about. He has, let's take a look here, Daniel Ricciardo. He has almost 10 million followers on Instagram. Like, this dude is obviously a tremendous personality. He is not. He's as much as he is known as a race car driver, he's just known for being Daniel Ricciardo. He's Daniel Ricciardo. He's a great personality, very interesting. Whatever he does, people are going to be interested in. People are going to watch. People are going to want to spend their money and pay attention to. So there are ways for him to be in racing, to be involved in it that don't involve him racing, and I think would still keep him relevant and grow the brand of Daniel Ricciardo even more. He can get into he could go work for Sky Sports. He could go work for ESPN. He could start his own media company. He could do like Dirty Mo Media equivalent for F1. If you don't know what Dirty Mo Media is, I believe that's Dale Earnhardt Jr. I think who is mostly running it, but like Dirty Mo Media, I think is where like Denny Hamlin is doing his podcast. Dale Earnhardt Jr. is doing his podcast. The Teardown with um, oh, why am I blanking on their names? Jordan Bianchi and Jeff Gluck. Like it's a big NASCAR brand. It's a big NASCAR media brand. I don't know that maybe he would want to do an F1 thing with them. Maybe he would want to do his own thing. I don't even know if he wants to be in media. Like maybe he just wants to fuck off and go to Australia and live in the outback again for a year. Who knows? Like I think there's it's obviously way too early to figure out what he's going to do next, but he doesn't need to be racing. And if he wants to race, that's great. I think that's cool. I think people will be happy with whatever it is he decides to do, whether it's race or not race, whether it's podcast or not podcast, whether it's fuck off for a year or don't fuck off for a year. Daniel Ricciardo is one of the coolest guys that I've ever got to see race, to watch race, and one of the coolest personalities, one of the funniest guys. Like I strive to have the same charisma, to be as charismatic as he is. That that's someone that a lot of people I think should look look up to, or just like to be inspired by, because the way that dude lives his life, he's just happy. He's happy go lucky. He could talk shit about all the stuff that's happened to him, and he's more or less 9 times out of 10 smiling, having a chuckle, having a laugh, and just being positive about it. Like that's, I think, so cool and so not relatable, but I think that's so. I think that's so motivating for at least myself. But I like to try and be that happy, positive, happy-go-lucky guy, and I love it if more people were like Daniel Ricciardo, the world would be a better place, straight up. But it is what it is, and unfortunately, he gets slightly disrespected because, um, he didn't have results with Renault when he was a Red Bull driver. He didn't have the results with McLaren. He didn't have the results with Racing Bulls. He didn't have the expectations were high, and yeah, things were never really the same once he left Red Bull. Yeah, that's fair, but he got that win at Monza. Um, he got to do a shoey with Lewis Hamilton. You know, it's not always about the racing, which I think it's hard to tell somebody like, Christian Horner or Helmut Munko or all of those guys running Red Bull. It's not all about the racing. It's about being a good person and, you know, being just a nice, genuine individual. And Ricardo is that. He's shown that his entire career. And I wish nothing but the best for him. I hope whatever he does next, I hope he's happy with it. I hope he enjoys it. And I hope he has fun with whatever he does, because he's Daniel Ricciardo. He will. That's who he is. So, um, I think we got time for a quick mailbag. I don't think we have many questions. I kind of answered one already with the 0-3 NFL teams. I guess I could have saved that for later, but it was also, I was talking about the Jags, so you know, kind of worked out that way. Let's take a look here. Another question. This is an NHL one, so a hockey one. I got to get the rest of those previews done. Sends, Wings, or Sabres, who's making the playoffs this year? Well, ideally the Wings. The Wings should, after how last season ended. I don't know that I trust the other two teams, the Ottawa Senators or the Buffalo Sabres, to make the playoffs. Definitely not Ottawa. Ottawa, I think it's going to miss out again. I think the Sabres will miss out again. I think the Wings will. I think the Wings should. The, if the Wings don't make the playoffs, then there's fire alarms are going off and ringing, and there's a lot of issues in Detroit. This if the Sens don't make the playoffs, I don't think it really like that's who Ottawa is. Ottawa's not good. They haven't been good. They're not going to be good. I don't think for a bit. They have good players, but it's the Senators. I don't know how to describe it. It's like an organizational thing, and it's kind of the same with the Sabres. Like I think the Sabres have some good guys, but like they're also the Sabres. You know, if I had to pick between the Sabres and Sens, who I think would make the playoffs first, I think the Sabres. But I think it's the Red Wings over the Sens or the Sabres because I think the Red Wings they were so close last year, and they I think they still have the longest streak of not making the playoffs. I think if I'm correct, they need to make the playoffs. The Red Wings need to, or otherwise there's problems. Not not really as much with Ottawa and Buffalo because I think they're both aren't they both bringing in new coaches this year. So like they've already gone through their panic and they've already fired a coach and fired coach who failed and bring in another one. But the Sens I will also say are so unambitious. Like they hired Travis Green. Like Travis Green was a fine coach with the Canucks. The Canucks got better once he left, which I guess if you're Ottawa, you're trying to get to where Travis Green was with the Canucks because that's success for the Ottawa Senators. But that doesn't seem good. That seems less than ideal. The Sabres hired Lindy Ruff, which like I get there's a nostalgia factor of bringing him back, but like I don't know, that's a fairly young team. I think I don't know that I love that. Red Wings over the Sens and the Sabres. That's my hot take. That's my pick. All right, that's the podcast. Thank you very much for listening. If you haven't already, by the way, this weekend it's a big rugby weekend. The WXV 1, 2, and 3. It's starting this weekend. I don't have time in this podcast to explain how it works. Basically, it's a huge international women's rugby tournament that's going on these next 3 weeks. If you are subscribed to my Substack, go read my previews. I previewed one in one article, and then I previewed WXV 2 and 3 in another. So 2 articles. Go take a look. They're great stuff. I want to also give a shout out to the Madagascar women's 15 rugby team. This was a team that debuted in 2019, and now they are in the WXV3. They are playing in an international women's rugby competition. This is their first time playing teams that aren't from Africa. They'll be playing European teams, which is cool, crazy to think in 5 years. Like they debuted before the pandemic, and there was a great opportunity for it to collapse, for them to fail, and instead they have worked their way up. They finished second in the 2024 Africa Cup this year, and now they're in WXV3. Like go read about the Madagascar women's 15 team. They're incredible. You can check that out on my Substack. If you click like down below in the captions, you should be able to have a link, subscribe, check it all out. Basically, you can listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever. I trying to plan out my schedule here for the next 2 weeks. We might do one podcast next week, just with my schedule and moving and all this sort of stuff. We might have one next week. We definitely won't have one the week after that. So like October 8th through, what is this here? the 7th through the 11th of October, we won't be having any podcasts. So we're hopefully have one next week between the 30th and the 4th. And then the week after, it's gonna be no podcast. So, and maybe if I'm really ambitious, we'll just do maybe our, because I know I got to do the rest of the NHL previews. Um, so I might just crush those either myself or we'll get somebody else, some other guests to come on. Um, but don't we'll see. Expect one podcast next week. If there's more, great. I want to get some of those NHL previews done before the season, and we won't be doing any podcasts on through the 7th to the 11th. So expect to hear back from me podcast wise on the 15th. I'll still be doing some articles. I'll still be doing some social stuff, but next podcast after next week, basically there's the week off between the 7th and the 11th, and then after that we'll be back on the 15th. So thank you very much for listening. Appreciate it. Again, listen to us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. You can follow me at Ian McNaughty on Instagram and Twitter. You can follow the podcast. You can follow at SYP Pod on Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever. Thank you very much for listening. Really appreciate it. We'll be back next week with an episode. Thank you. Have a great rest of your weekend. Peace.